I think we should begin. Um, so I want to begin this session with a quote by the Dhammapada, where we are told hostilities don't end by hostilities. You have to end hostility, with end hostility with love and compassion. So we might say, oh, he hurt me, or he insulted me, but that only stills hostility. So I want us to remember that message as we continue to understand and learn what we are here to talk about today. My name is Soraya Dean. I am an activist and community organizer. I'm talking to you from Los Angeles. It's 12 noon here. And with me are two exemplary, knowledgeable panelists. Suleiman Ghali, who is the co-founder of the Islamic Center of San Francisco. He's an imam and a reformist. Also with me is Khadija Khan, whose family goes back to Pakistan, and then of course she lived in Germany, and now she is in London. She's a writer, she's a storyteller, and she's a journalist. Welcome, the two of you. And then to all the panelists, thank you so much for taking the time and signing up and wanting to listen to what we have to share today. So this program today is to remember, to honor, and to mourn the life of Samuel Paty. He was a history teacher, 47 years old, and who was brutally murdered. Now, Samuel Paty was killed and beheaded with a cleaver. A cleaver is a large butcher's knife by Abdoullakh Anzorov. He was only 18. He was an 18-year-old Muslim, a Russian refugee, and of Chechen ethnicity. So we want to impress upon you that Samuel Paty's death is an attack on fundamental human rights of the French people. It is an attack on the sovereignty and the security of France. Samuel Paty's death is an attack on millions of peace-loving Muslims in and out of France. Samuel Paty's murder is an attack on Islam, now contaminated by the teachings and radical clerics' preachings, and the Sharia and manufactured hadith. And Samuel Paty's death, above all, is also an attack on young school children. Now, some say France has failed Muslims, and some others say Muslims have failed France. But let us be very clear on one fact, and that is no amount of grievance or alienation or lack justifies the decapitation of a teacher. Our program today has three goals. One is, of course, to recognize the grievance of the French Muslims. But let us remind ourselves and remind the French Muslims that equality, justice, power, and relevance will not be delivered to us in a neat package with a bow. We Muslims have to work for it. It is a social construct earned and accumulated. Let us not forget that. Then the goal of this program is also to recognize that France has every right to uphold and defend its secular values. French democracy we know has been established against church and monarchy. And the third and the most important goal today for us is to talk about moral reciprocity. Now, this is a concept that was introduced by Dr. King, where he called on the African Americans during the civil rights movement to look within. So today, Muslims, we can't censor ourselves anymore. We must look within and put our house in order. And this was said by none other than Egyptian President Abdel Sisi. He said, a tajweed, that is a revival of Islamic discourse, is necessary. He said it is necessary in order to save Islam and the Muslims. I don't know about his political views, but I really thoroughly endorse what he said here, that we need a revival of Islamic discourse. So in order to continue our program, I'm going to pose a few questions to my panelists. And then in the last 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the availability of time, we will open it up for questions. Please type your questions in the chat room. So Khadija, there are concerns among Muslims about what's happening in France and in other European countries. How can we distinguish between legitimate concerns and propaganda, and what can be done to combat disinformation?
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be a part of a discussion that has been organized to honor the memory of Samuel Paty, a French history teacher who was brutally beheaded in broad daylight for merely doing his job. His job was to educate his students about how to uphold the French values of free speech and how to be tolerant of opposing views. It's very strange time. The whole world is hugely suffering in the middle of the global pandemic. Yet this human catastrophe couldn't deter these terrorists from committing atrocities against innocent people in France, Austria, Mozambique, and now in Nigeria, where Boko Haram killed more than 100 farmers in cold blood. They say Islamic State does not exist in Syria anymore. Perhaps it's true, but their vile ideology called Islamism that endorses the killing of innocent people lives on. And we have seen the manifestation of that ideology in France and in other parts of the world. This shows that the ideology does not die. This needs to be challenged, condemned, mocked, debunked, and repudiated. Therefore, it is very important to scrutinize the ideology of Islamism and to maintain the distinction between Muslims as people and Islamism as an ideology, because if the lines have been blurred, then obviously it would be very difficult to talk about the ideology that is vile and intolerant and endorses the killing of innocent people. This is a very sad reality. While France was mourning its victim, the debate has been dramatically shifted from the victims of terrorism to the victim of supposed Islamophobia. I said suppose because there has not been any case registered or reported that tells us that the ongoing crackdown on Islamists or people having links with Islamist organization abroad is actually targeting French Muslims. The dynamics again then behind this speech of President Macron, French President Macron, and the plan he proposed have been misrepresented in the mainstream media. The narrative that French state is going into any conflict with the French Muslims by attacking their faith seems to be based on assumptions, false propaganda, and distorted facts. Proposals such as imam being trained and certified in France. This will be done under the supervision of French Council of Muslims, not under the supervision of French state. And then there is another proposal to control over foreign funding of mosques. This is not the first time when this, excuse me about this, this is quite disturbing at the moment. Okay, this is not the first time that this concern has been raised. In 2016, the French Council of Muslims, they raised this issue to address the fears that radical foreign influence over some mosques in France can encourage radicalization in certain section of Muslim community. And the other proposal, which has been very controversial, that attending school will be compulsory for children from Muslim community. If this rule applies across the board, I think it's a very good opportunity for the Muslim community to interact with the wider society, because there is a section within the Muslim community that is not tolerant of opposing views. When Samuel Paty wanted to show those caricature of Prophet Muhammad in the classroom in a lesson on free speech, he said to his Muslim students that you may find these cartoons offensive, you can leave the classroom. That shows that there is this section that is not tolerant of opposing views, and this issue needs to be addressed. And I think if now one more thing that I want to make clear here, that I'm not saying that we should take these proposals and policies at its face value. These policies and these proposals need to be scrutinized, criticized, but criticism for the sake of criticism is a way of deflecting attention from the real issues. We need constructive criticism, which is a valuable tool to hold government accountable for its policies. And for that, we need to have an open and honest discussion. But people who act as Islamist apologists and sympathizers, they have made it clear to the world that their sympathies have never been with the victims of these terrorist attacks. They are least concerned about the involvement of those school children who must have been brainwashed into believing that they are not doing any wrong. They are protecting the honor of their prophet by pointing out their teacher to those killers. And this is a very grave concern at the moment, the radicalization of the vulnerable people. And these are the people who are not concerned about the protection of the Paris imam who denounced the terrorism, and now he is forced into living in hiding at the moment because of the threats he received from Islamist and extremist people. That is happening in France. He's not feeling safe and protected in France. So we need to make distinction between this ideology that is vile and Muslim and the people, but we also be aware of the false propaganda that has been done in the aftermath of these terrorist attacks. And in this situation, we see that it is very difficult, obviously, to separate the propaganda and the facts. We see that the term Islamophobia that has been used apparently to define anti-Muslim bigotry, but it's a ambiguous meaning and vague implications have made many people wary of its normalization in political and social discourse. People are being accused of being Islamophobic because they are criticizing certain aspect of religion, and therefore they are shut down by these apologists who don't want to have any discussion about Islamist ideology. Especially in the aftermath of these terrorist attacks, we see that when the discussion about what drive these Islamists to commit such atrocities against innocent people has become a focused point, then a certain group of people who act as Islamist apologists or sympathizer, they weaponized this word Islamophobia to shut down the debate around Islamist ideology. Articles.
Right. Khadija, in the interest of time, I have to ask you a cross question.
Yes.
So you're talking about fresh discourse, right? Fresh
Yes.
involvement.
Yes.
So who will be the stakeholders? Who will participate? Because it will be much of the same, right?
Yes. Actually, this is very important, what I said that, earlier, that we need to make distinction between the false propaganda and the real criticism, the constructive criticism, because constructive criticism is very important to hold government accountable for its policies. Now we see that after these terrorist attack, articles have been published in mainstream media outlets misquoting French president's speech and the plan he proposed to tackle Islamist threat. And one article published in Financial Times was reportedly taken down for misquoting French president, and a Washington Post journalist, she apologized for misquoting the plan French president proposed to counter Islamist threat. And the overall, they tried to, create an impression that there is a conflict between the French state and ordinary Muslims. So these ordinary Muslims are the stakeholder, and we know that many French Muslims, they are standing by their president in his fight against Islamism.
Right, right. And I even heard the president of France saying French citizens, especially Muslim citizens, need to be protected from
Yes,
radical Islamism. He says,
exactly.
which aims to turn some of our citizens against the republic. And he said, we will not let this happen.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
the excuses have been that this was merely an error to misquote French president or the plan he proposed, which I don't think is a fair point to make, because we know that this is a very sensitive topic, and it requires reasonable deliberation before making comments, let alone publishing article under the banner of mainstream media outlets. And then amazingly enough, an article published in New York Times chose to quote Turkish president's outrage over the republication of the cartoons and his calls for boycotting French products. And some other outlets, they quote the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan.
yeah,
Both countries, they have a terrible record on human rights violation. Minorities are persecuted in both countries. Women are discriminated against in both countries. LGBTQ people are discriminated against
right.
in both countries. Any vulnerable section of the society, you name it, and they are persecuted in those
That's true.
countries.
That's true.
So it is reckless and ridiculous to quote such people in your defense for not standing in solidarity with the French president in his fight against Islamism. So it's really important for the ordinary Muslims to make this distinction, because the fact remains that if the president Macron had not contacted these media outlets to correct their misquotations in their articles, their disingenuous narrative would never be exposed to those people who they may intend to manipulate. And
Thank you.
it's a very dangerous,
Yeah. We will get
position.
back to that a little in depth a little later. I want to go to Suleiman. Suleiman, we know so well
Sure.
that Charlie Hebdo became an ideological and a physical battleground for Muslims. So, where do these radical Muslims get their ideas to justify killing? Did Azra now, the 18-year-old, just wake up and want to kill Samuel Paty? How is this happening, and how do we combat this ideology of hate, Suleiman?
Well,
Big question.
first of all, thank you, Soraya, and thank you for inviting me to participate. And thanks a lot for sharing this with others. Uh, you gotta look at the root cause of these things. This is not something that just have been created overnight. This particular uh, theology is exists in fiqh books, in hadith books, in theology. Actually, it's taught in Al Azhar University, the most prestigious university, Islamic university in the world, that has been in existence for 1,100 years. And they teach that stuff in theology books. They teach it in their secondary high school religious schools. Uh, there are lawyers in Egypt right now suing Al Azhar University to be able to take those from the curriculum. It's just the battle is you look at the fiqh books, you look at someone like Ibn Taymiyyah and many other consensus of fuqaha, of so-called Muslim scholars. The consensus is if somebody insults the Prophet Allah, if someone insults Allah, okay, and he asks for repentance, for forgiveness, yeah, he's forgiven. He asks for tawbah. But if he insults the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he makes istighfar and he makes tawbah and he repents, still the punishment is death. That's in fiqh books. That is not something. Uh, these kids, these young men that adhere to that ideological uh, abomination, they hear it in their Friday sermon. They hear it in the mosque. You go, look, I was here in San Francisco. I was about last year. I attended a tablighi, Jama'at Tablighi mosque, the imam from them. I was late. I wanted to go in. So I went in and he was just making dua after prayer for Allah to destroy the Jews, to destroy the Kafirs. This isn't a Friday sermon. This is happening in the heart of the most technologically advanced city in the world, San Francisco. It's happening in Silicon Valley. It's happening in our mosque. It's happening. This is, can you imagine what's happening in Nigeria or Friday sermons in the mosque in Bangladesh, in the mosque in Pakistan, in the mosque in Egypt? We have a problem. And the problem is, it is in our theological fiqh books. It's in the books of Sunnah. It's just what these people are doing. They think they are following the religion. So
So
you
they
have to.
are so they are misguided, and the clerics are misguiding them more. The
They're
radical
actually
Islamists,
they're
very
actually
clear here.
they're actually they think of themselves to be guided, and you and us and people that are trying to be tolerant and try to bring the beautiful aspect of Islam, we are, in their eyes, we are the one who are misguided. So they are following to them. They are following the Sunnah. These, if you read the book of Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim and some of these books, we talk about ISIS and Al Qaeda and all these things, but where do they get their theology from? There's when they burned a Jordanian pilot. They put him in a cage and they lit him up. They pour gasoline on him and they just let him melt in front of the camera in an inferno. Where did they get that from? It's not their invention. It is something that they got from these books that promotes that ideology. It promotes killing apostate, killing infidels, killing. I just posted today something about a battle in Rome when the Ottoman in 1485, when they went to that little Italian town and they forced people to convert, and the people did not want to convert. They killed about 500 people right there.
Hmm.
Okay, so and this is not a political statement. This is a theological education that we as Muslim have to combat. And
Hmm.
this goes way farther, way behind what's happening in France. It's happening all over the world, and the most people that are really hurt by it are the Muslims themselves in
Right.
countries predominantly Muslim. So the theology right there, the biggest challenge for us, and like you mentioned something about the foreign imams in France, how to combat. I'm a foreign imam myself. I was I came into this country as a student, and we started the Islamic Society of San Francisco. And I was not trained as a religious scholar or an imam or anything. I just was an activist, wanted to start. We started a mosque, and the mosque became big and big and big and big and became bigger than we ever thought is going to be that size. and no one to give the sermon. So I started to give the sermon. I and the books that I looked to give the sermon was books that I got from Saudi Arabia embassy, or Salafi books, or Wahhabi books, or any books that I would read and take a little bit of, quotes from here, quotes from there, verses from here, and I would just go ahead a Friday sermon and deliver the sermon to about 1,000 people listening to me. And that's the problem with the foreign imams. We are there are a lot of there are a lot of people who are not trained. They run these operations, they run these mosques, and they run them based on groups. You got the Muslim Brotherhood, you got the Jama'at Tabligh, you got this group, you got this imam, you got mosque is basically just totally controlled by Indians. You got mosque totally controlled by Arabs. You got mosque controlled by the Afghanistani. So the mosque right now, when you say I want to go to a mosque, you say I want to go to the Yemeni mosque, or I want to go to the Tablighi mosque. So we do have a big problem that it's just
Yeah.
we
This
have to
this is a
confront.
huge problem, and sadly we have not named this problem. So it has aggravated, because what is at the bottom I see is the promotion of religious fundamentalism abroad became a cornerstone of Saudi foreign policy. Now I am,
Yeah.
we have to, yeah, and I am a victim of that myself. Last year in Sri Lanka there was a terror attack, and 270 people were killed by Islamist terrorists blowing up churches and other
Soraya,
hotels.
let me
Yeah.
tell you a story that happened to me. I went to Saudi Arabia in 1996, and I went there and I met the biggest religious Wahhabi scholar in the world. His name, Sheikh Muhammad bin Uthaymeen. He was the head of the religious authority, and he died many years ago. But he was like, whatever he said, he's got like tens of hundreds of books and tapes, and big scholar, Muhammad bin Uthaymeen. So I met him in Mecca, and I sat down with him in Mecca. And while I was talking to him, this is a man, had he issued any fatwa, it becomes a law. It becomes an opinion followed by millions, maybe hundreds of millions. When I talked to him and I explained to him that I was from America and we wanted to invite him to come to America, and then he said, and during the discussion, he did not know the difference between America and England. He thought that English language in America and English and America speaks a different language than England. Basically, he had no clue that both countries, England and the United States of America, both speaks English. He did not know. This is a man that is really such an influential figure in Islam that has no basic understanding of two of the most powerful countries in the world.
So
And
just
these
knowledge
people,
of the text.
and these people are taught us our religion in modern time.
Wow, knowledge of the text and not the context,
Exactly.
right?
I want to
And
add something.
yes,
I really want
please,
to appreciate this narrative that the facts that Salman has just told us. It's
Suleiman.
really sorry, Suleiman has told us. It's really encouraging because we don't get to hear this narrative so often. Mostly the minority that is very much vocal and influential is those people who are very much apologetic in their attitude and in their assertions. They don't talk about the problems that are within the Muslim community. They would always blame imperialism. They would always blame Western society for all the ills we are facing at the moment. So yes, this self-reflection is very important aspect that we need to talk about, and it's really encouraging that an imam is talking about this thing, and then we can hope that people would listen to this narrative, and they will find it a better option, and this will definitely help them to integrate in the society better.
By
Yes.
the way, by the way, I don't like titles anymore, like Imam, Sheikh, this. because uh, there's so much negativity associated with it, that we have so many corrupt imams, so many corrupt scholars, so many corrupt sheikh, that it just basically, I'm not, compl- I actually went to pharmacy school as a young kid, but I was not trained as an imam. I became an imam as by default, working within the Muslim community over 30 years of activism. And then they start calling me imam because there was no one around our community that is trained. And I'm glad, because every time we came across a trained scholar from Al Azhar or an imam, he caused the problem in our mosque,
Hmm.
caused division in our mosque, caused division in the community. So that's why I like to be called Suleiman right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, getting to Khadija, today the three of us will be branded Islamophobes. I have already been, because we raise these questions that nobody asks. So, Khadija, earlier you mentioned that in the aftermath of these terror attacks, the term Islamophobia has been weaponized to shut down debate about Islamism.
Yes.
How so? How so?
It's it's very evident that the debate we see after these terrorist attack has been dramatically shifted, as I said, from the victims of terrorism to the victims of supposed Islamophobia. I said supposed because there is no case registered or reported that tells us that this crackdown on Islamists in France is actually targeting ordinary Muslims. So there is this, the talking and the paddling of this one term, Islamophobia. We have seen it's been increasingly becoming a topic of discussion in France, and these people are no more discussing about the decapitation of Samuel Paty or the other terrorist attack. Their only concern is pushing this narrative into the social discourse that Islamophobia is on the rise. I say that Islamophobia does not protect the Muslims as people, because it focuses on protecting an ideology or seeking privileges for the certain section of the Muslim community, not all Muslims. Because when they define Islamophobia, then in that definition they exclude that is the perceived Muslimness. They exclude liberal Muslims, progressive Muslims, dissenters, blasphemers, apostates, and LGBTQ people. They exclude those people. It's not a term that defines prejudice towards all Muslim all people of Muslim heritage. And then the constant misuse, that is the biggest thing. That constant misuse of this term Islamophobia has made its authenticity irrelevant in the discussion, while reducing it to a tool in the hands of Islamists and their sympathizers. Whenever you talk about religion, then they would call you Islamophobic and they would try to shut down the debate. Whenever you would talk about extremism in the religious discourse, they would, hurl the accusations of Islamophobic around. The aim is to shut down the debate around this ideology. And when they are doing it, they are not protecting ordinary Muslims, because we know that there are laws existing in the Western society that protect Muslims and other people from prejudice and bigotry. There is no need to, come up with a term which is so much controversial and which has been used by the Islamists and their sympathizers to shut down the debate on around the issues of Islamist influence over the people. And we know that how this ideology influences people, and they go on killing innocent people, and then they justify it in the name of protecting their religious sensibilities. And now by using it, this term against those people who are progressive and liberal within the Muslim community or outside the Muslim community, who talk about human rights, who talk about equality. This term has become a synonym for blasphemy, I would say, because um, we know that religious rights are not compatible with human rights. It's an individual's right to practice its religion freely, but this is a reality that when we look at the religious right, it's not fair with all people, even not with the followers. There are some rights for men and other rights for women, and then other rights for the other vulnerable section of the society. So we see that all people are born equal, and their human rights are basic rights, and they should be protected under the secular law of the land. And this is what is happening in the Western society, where the secular laws exist. And this term Islamophobia is clearly used against these liberal voices from within the Muslim community and outside the Muslim community. Like you and me and Suleiman, we are talking about the ground realities. We are not talking about assumption. We are not interpreting, someone's ideas or someone's belief. We are talking about what's going on, in the society at the moment, and we want to talk about these issues. But in doing so, obviously, we are inviting these accusation of being Islamophobic, and this is how they use it, and this is how this term has been weaponized to shut
Right.
down the debate around these issues, which are very much crucial at the moment.
Right. And you bring up a very valid point. The secular laws of each and every country we live in protects us. Why
Exactly.
do we need this extra thing?
Actually,
Saying that, just one point I want to make,
sure.
that saying that defending secular values is somehow fueling anti-Muslim bigotry. This is their main argument, that when you talk about secularism and laicity, then you are actually fueling anti-Muslim sentiments. This is not true, because
Mm.
secularism is a system that protects all minorities and their right to practice their religion freely. And if you look at the Muslim majority country, where the laws are based on Sharia law, on the interpretation of religious belief, there is the discrimination. They treat men differently, women differently. Minorities have very few rights, or you can say no rights at all. They are being persecuted, and people who do this persecution, they do it with immunity. I mean, they don't have any fear of
Right.
state and any other power in the country. So these secular values, they protect minorities. And when we talk about censorship, when we talk about curtailment of freedom of speech, then we are giving away our own rights to speak freely, to protest when we see any discrimination happening against any vulnerable person in the society. So it's very important to support secular values that protect minorities and their right to protect, to practice their religion freely.
And especially in France, right?
Yes,
That is a
exactly.
slogan because
Yes,
it was
laicite.
founded on secularism, not on the
Yes,
Catholic Church. So,
exactly.
and I visited Paris 4 years ago with my daughter, and we went to the Grand Mosque, and
And
I was veiled, my daughter was veiled, but but at the entrance to the mosque we were given special clothes to wear, and this kind of thing, it bothered me because I knew the coming events were casting shadows.
yes,
So these kinds of little things that told us these powerful stories that were yet to come, powerful meaning these damaging things that were yet to come, is was very evident. And I don't know uh, what steps more could France have taken other than what it's taking now in the most humane way to address these challenges. Suleiman,
yes,
you had to say something.
Yeah, it's the issue of secular societies. Even Muslims who adhere to follow Sharia, they don't even follow the example of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The Prophet and the Quran is very clear. There is no compulsion in religion. We all know that. There is no force to be used against anyone, whether they want to be mu'min, they want to be kafir, whatever they want to be. And the Prophet respected that ideology and started a civil society, a secular society in Medina when he left Mecca, where diversity existed. You had Jews, you had Christian, you had all kind of, and the Prophet made it clear that everybody followed their own religion, their own faith, and no one was forced. No one was forced to eat, to change their eating habit, their dress habit, their prayer habit, their rituals, or anything. But we as Muslim, we have a fundamental misunderstanding of the core value of the Quran. In it just even the meaning of Islam, even what Islam means, we are not in agreement what it means. Like Islam is a religion that encompasses not just the follower of Muhammad. It encompasses the followers of every prophet, every messenger, Jews, Christian. The Quran is very clear that the fundamental uh, 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 classification of you becoming a believer is to believe in God and the hereafter and do good deeds, do good work. There is, we follow Muhammad, we're Muslim. You follow Jesus, you're Muslim. You follow Moses, you're Muslim. But right now, we made ourselves into a superior race. We are the chosen people by God. If we believe in Muhammad and the last messenger, we're the only people going to heaven. Everybody else going to hell. We're the only people saved. We're better. We're going to get to heaven. We're going to have virgins and wives and this and that, and just delusional theology that is completely not based on the understanding of the Quran. So the problem manifests itself in so many different ways in the killing in France, in Nigeria, in Egypt, in Syria, in Yemen, because we have created a parallel religion to Islam. The Islam that is practiced right now is based on men, on male, on Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Ibn Taymiyyah, Imam this. We have men that we've created between them and heaven a special bond that does not exist. So when Imam Abu Hanifa says something, that means it is God telling you that. When Imam Shafi'i says something, so this is a fundamental problem. You know, one of the scholars in the Middle East uh, just recently died. Recently said the religion should be basically upgraded every 100 years. Throw everything that we know, throw the past, consider it as history books, and let's come up with theology that is really reflective of our today culture, our today world, our today knowledge. But we're not doing that. We're stuck in the 7th century. Every sermon you hear in the mosque is encouraging people. We want to go back to the Salaf. We want to go back to the time of the Prophet. We want to go back. No one, I've never heard a sermon that talks about the future. Let's move forward. It's still, they talk about music is haram, hijab is mandatory, killing and doing all that thing. So we have a big problem in understanding what the basic tenet of Islam is.
Yeah. And then to add to what you said, Suleiman, I think the men with the beards, you also have a beard, but it's a smaller one. They pretend and walk around
It's
as
a
if they're the
style more than anything else.
that
It's
they're
a
the
fashion
recipients.
statement.
The men, yes, the men behave as if they're the recipients of God's message, and the women are the benefactors. So you
Yeah.
will benefit what we give you. And here's what we forgot as women. The prophet said, "Paradise lies at the feet of thy mother." I mean, just imagine the strength of that statement. In order to enter paradise, uh,
Yeah.
in whatever way you construct it, allegorically or really or literally, the women have to be looked up to. She's in such a special place, but somehow we have lost that. And on that topic, I'm going to go to Khadija, because I want to ask her, because she writes so much about women and empowerment. Do you see a special role for Muslim women to address extremism in Europe and France in particular? Do you see women?
Yes, of course, there is a big role for women to play in this whole situation. I believe that religion can be a force of good and a force of evil. And historically, it is proven. So it is very important to keep the discourse open for diversity of opinion and different interpretations, so that this distinction between a faith and a politicized version of religion can be maintained. As far as the role of women is concerned, that we should see that women has been deprived of her basic rights in the name of divine, authority that has been given to men in different roles, like husband, father, and they are the guardians, the protectors, and women have to obey, and therefore she has less right. Her witness is not as equal to men. Her right in inheritance is not equal to men, and men have a right to beat their wives, and then they say that it was like lightly beating and all that, but still they have an ordained right to rule over women. And it's been, I would say, like centuries that women have given away their basic rights in the name of obeying their God and following their religion. It's time for them to fight for their own kind, to stand up for their own kind. And I guess when the women will take responsibility, especially Muslim women, we see that when we talk about hijab, we don't talk about a piece of cloth. We don't talk about an individual who is wearing hijab. We talk about the ideology behind this attire. Why women are obliged to wear it? Why women have to be modest and wear it? Why it's a responsibility to, making a man look civilized his own women, and why she has to bear this responsibility. So we talk about the ideology, and this is what I say, that you are people in general are following a religion, they subscribe to a faith. It's their right to do it, and they should do it freely and without having any fear of being persecuted. But we need to understand is that when we start applying religion into the social and political discourse, there we have problem. We don't give people equality under the law of, under the law of religious scripture. We see that women and other vulnerable section of the society are being discriminated against because they are not considered pious enough or modest enough, or not suitable enough to be fit in a perfect Islamic state. So women have to take responsibility for their own kind in the first place, because it's the women who are suffering the most under this Sharia law. And then obviously they have all right to follow their religion, but do not try to sell inequality, prejudice towards women as something divine to the world, because this is what it is. It is discrimination, it is prejudice, it is inequality. And we are living in a world where we want to see men and women equal in terms of human rights. So they need to take a stand, firm stand, and they need to, I would say,
Join
they need to
forces.
go, exactly, they need to
Yes,
go
yeah.
one step further before
Further,
men,
yeah.
because once they will be in a position to talk about these issues, then definitely
Right.
the role of men we see, under in Islamic or in conservative religious societies, that would be reduced to
That's
its
right.
limit. I'm not saying that men should be inferior to women, but that will
Together.
be like together they can
Yeah.
solve these
In
problems.
the interview, we
And
have just 10 minutes.
yes.
We just opened up a little space of hope and possibility, but again, I feel it narrows. So, this question I want to ask Suleiman. Suleiman, the Islamic paradigm of law, religion, and nation differs fundamentally from the Christian one. There is no separation, right? Islam, religion, and state are not distinct, it's a whole. So, is Islamism inevitable? Is Suleiman there? I don't see him.
Yeah, yeah, I'm
I-
here.
Is Islamism inevitable because it's all
It's
wrapped in one ball?
Islam. Islam is right now, as we practice it as Muslim. I can't um, emphasize how important it is for us to really revisit a lot of the foundational beliefs that we have about the role of Islam in our lives. First of all, the connection between government and Islam. First of all, it's not the role of government is to take people to heaven or to prevent people from going to hell. That's not the role of the government. It is very clear in Islam, you as an individual are solely responsible for your own action. Your judgment day, you in front of Allah all alone. There's no one is defending you. It is you and your creator. So you're responsible for your own action. The government absolutely has no and should not play any role in religion. It is up to you. And that's what the Quran says. If you want to believe or you don't want to believe, it is your personal choice to make. So, right now, after the death, I am 100% certain, convinced myself, my own opinion, that after the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Islam ended. Islam, as it was intended, ended with the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the new Islam that came along is all pretty much so much influenced by man-made theology. They mixed other theology, culture, and everything, and the books of hadith and all the fiqh, and they produced to us what we have right now. So we have a fundamental problem that we really need to discuss.
Right, thank you. So, in the interest of time, by God, this question is to both of you. Kuwait and Qatar boycotting French goods. You refer to this, Khadija. Turkey is questioning President Macron's mental status, health, and Pakistan and Malaysia are fueling the fans of extremism. The moderate Muslims who denounce extremism and violence. Are we responding adequately to this crisis? Just take 1 minute, please. What can
Okay.
we do?
Yeah, look, it's whole right now. Everybody's using this incident for political gains, and that's what it is.
Nobody is being honest and truthful about the.
It's all political. They're still using French medicine. They're using French technology. They're using French air conditioning. They're using French cars. So it's all right now. It's all political, and it's all kind of scoring points and gaining more popularity on an emotional issue.
Hmm.
As I
Khadija?
said, that Pakistan and Turkey and other Muslim countries, they have very terrible record on human rights violations, and it's very reckless to literally look up to them when we are talking about discrimination against people on the basis of their religion. So I would say that moderate and liberal voices, we don't the mainstream media has to play a very important role in this situation, because the liberal and progressive voices within the Muslim community should be encouraged. What we see that a very regressive, conservative, and rigid outlook has been given to the Muslim community, and it seems like they have their only concern is to protect the religious sensibilities, and they are all the time being offended whenever their fellow citizens practice their right to free speech, which is not the true representation of Muslim communities, because Muslim communities are very diverse, and this conservative and rigid and people who believe in literal interpretation of religion, it's a section in the Muslim community that has been given a priority, I would say, over the progressive people and liberal people. We need to hear those moderate people. There are voices, but we don't get to hear them often, and it's the duty of mainstream media, moral duty, I would say, mainstream media, to amplify the voices of those liberal people who can navigate these crises in a better way, I would say, because there is this disturbance and we cannot deny its existence. But there is a solution to this problem, and that solution is that we need to look up to those people who talk about equality, human rights, secularism, and then they are following their religion. They are free to follow whatever interpretation of religion. I mean, Muslims are being discriminated by fellow Muslims for not being enough Muslims. So here in the West, they have this right to practice their religion the way they want, with the interpretation they may prefer.
So
You want to
looking at
allow some questions, Soraya? You want to allow some questions before we leave? If anybody have any question from people watching?
Yes, I also want to make a closing comment before that. I think wherever I see there's a huge gap in our community, because religion is the chief argument for loyalty, and this has to stop. And then when I look at the countries that are impacted by terrorism, coming from Sri Lanka, I'm studying the causes and the consequences of what happened on Easter Sunday. There was in fact ghettoization and stagnation, and there was citizenship without obligation, education without social action, civic engagement, social responsibility. And I think these are some of the issues that we have to very strongly focus on as a community, because Dr. King was very clear during the civil rights movement. The African Americans suffered horrendously, but he held the community together because he gave them a larger dream of what is possible in America. So I think today the Muslims in France, particularly because we're talking about the crisis in France, they have to look at the larger France that they are living in today, and feed into that hope and feed into that possibility if we are going to come out of this all winners. And thank you for reminding me, Suleiman. I see Hassan, who is a prolific researcher on Islam, who wrote the book How Sharia-ism Has Hijacked Islam. Hassan, do you have a question for us?
Well, actually, I could show you the theological equation of the driving force of the killers, of the terrorists. Whereas Suleiman mentioned, it is in theology. They are only following their prophet. And the Quran says that the prophet is your best ideal. So they follow the hadiths. Let me give you the references to, as it may be saved in the internet. These killers follow the prophet's examples of killing mockers. Ka'b bin Ashraf, Sahih Bukhari, volume 3, 687. And then there is a woman. It is in Sunan Abu Dawud 4348. One Jewish lady, Abu Dawud 4349, and wife Sarah and Murtad ibn Khattal and his singing girl. It's all in Sirat Ibn Ishaq, page 551. So when their prophet killed the mockers, they would kill the mockers. Now, is that true? We basically forget that the language of the protester proves the character of the protester. We have examples in Bukhari, volume 4, 43, volume 8, 174, that Prophet asked his grandson to reply mockers by creating or writing mocking poems. And then let's come back to the Quran. The Quran mentions mockery, mentions mockers, but never ever mentions any violence against them. Rather,
Yeah.
thank you, Sulaiman. It says, if there is a mockery, walk away. That is in chapter Nisa 140 and Anam
That's
68.
true. That's
And
true.
the Quran says, if someone mocks to you, respond with peace. That is in Furqan 63. And most importantly, the Quran says, if there is a mockery, overlook, ignore. That is in Al-Ahzab 48. And that's all because Allah said, He is enough for the mockers. That is in Surah Hijr 95. So, Sulaiman, aren't we violating the Quran?
No, no, there is no. See, right now, when you want to compare the Quran, with the books of Hadith, when you say the Prophet said, and then you mention Sahih Bukhari, there is no evidence that what is in Sahih Bukhari is exactly what the Prophet said. It's just a book that someone is saying that the Prophet said that.
I understand what you mean. Said that. But for them, those killers, Sahih Bukhari is as good as the Quran. But
yes, not only as good as the Quran, it supersedes the Quran. Yes. It is if any hadith is correct in Sahih Bukhari, it overrides the Quran.
It is in their mind. But let's come back to prophets. Those Sahih hadiths killing mockers. The Quran says about the Prophet that if the Prophet says anything against the Quran, the God would catch his right hand and cut his life artery. So it's just not possible that the Prophet would behave against the Quranic dictums. So all these...
The Quran says...
Let me finish this one sentence.
Sure.
When the Quran said that the Prophet cannot say anything which I didn't say, if he does that, then I would catch his right hand and cut his life artery. That is in chapter Haqqah, verses 44 to 46. So, when the Quran says how to respond to mockers, and those hadiths are contradicting the Quranic dictum, definitely those hadiths are fake. Please, over to you.
Yeah, last minute. Yeah, we are out of time.
I want to say one thing, that we need to understand that blasphemy is not a crime in France.
It's not a crime in Islam.
Yes, you can say that, but there are traditions in Islam, hadith, as Hassan mentioned, that says that you kill people who are who ridicule Islam or ridicule Prophet. But we need to understand this thing, that we are living in 21st century. We have universal human rights, and these human rights are for everyone, regardless of their religion, race, and nationality. And we need to uphold these human rights, and we need to understand, and we need to promote this kind of narrative within the Muslim community, and obviously outside the Muslim community, that these human rights should be upheld and should be protected and preserved for the betterment of the society. And
Suleiman, I will give you the last word because we are out of time, and then we will have another. The promise is that we'll have another discussion with Hassan also.
The root cause of all this problems is we have ignored the Quran, and we're following the books of Hadith, the books of Fiqh. We're following men, and we have completely ignored Quran. You want the proof? Next time you visit a mosque and you listen to the Imam and you see how many times they give you a verse from the Quran versus how many hadith you're going to hear. You're not going to hear the Imam of Al-Azhar currently, right now, Imam al-Tayyib, when he was confronted with the question that the books of hadith are made up by fallible men. He said, if we take the books of hadith from Islam today, 2/3 of our religion will be eliminated. So we are a religion right now following books by fallible male, and we're not following the Quran.
Written 300 years after the Prophet, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So in conclusion, thank you so much,
8,
everybody.
9, 10 generations. Yeah.
Panelists, let us remember this once again. Unequivocal sorrow and apology and grief to the family of Samuel Paty and to France. We mourn with you, and a call to Muslims. We are all not guilty, but we are all responsible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.